Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.
We bring in Jay Paterno. Jay, thanks so much for your time today. Appreciate it so much.
Thanks, and obviously wish we were talking under a lot of different circumstances.
Yeah, no question. The irony is it's the passing of what would have been the 96th birthday of your dad right. As we speak about this, which has not been lost on us, okay?
My dad don't worry about my birthday.
Yeah, believe me. I can hear him now.
Stop talking about my birthday. Doesn't matter.
I can hear loud and clear.
Yep.
I want to get to the last few years. What did Franco's depth of loyalty mean to you and to the family?
Oh, it was everything. I mean, you find out in life very quickly when things go south, and you go through some difficulty, especially when it involves something as public as what we went through. You find out very quickly who was loyal and who never was. And Franco Harris never hesitated, never needed clarification of what something meant or whatever it was. He knew the integrity of Joe and knew the integrity of Sue, and immediately put a stake in the ground and said, this is not right. Joe Paterno was a great man. And his loyalty was just massive at a time when a lot of us, in our family were looking for anybody to take a stand, and he did not hesitate at all. But that's not surprising given the character of the man that he was.
Absolutely. And not only that, the great philanthropist. I was explaining earlier that every year, when we were allowed to have it, the Run to the 50, because that's the largest fundraiser for Special Olympics, and he was always there to be the starter every year.
Yep.
And he took the time to be there. What did that mean to your mom, that when it came time to do something that she needed was special, that he was always there?
Well, I think the thing, not only was he the starter, but he was there to the last person across the finish line.
That's right.
I mean, this is not a guy who just wrote checks and said, okay, great. This was a guy who put his hand in the dirt, so to speak, to really try and create the kind of change in the world that he wanted to see. And he did it with charities in Pittsburgh, and he and Dana were involved the last year and a half, 2 years with my mom in trying to do something with the Lion Pantry at Penn State and help current students at Penn State deal with food insecurity. So it is something that he has given of himself. And, the thing about it is athletes, if they're lucky, they get one moment to have a chance to do something that helps them grasp immortality. And the Immaculate Reception was that for Franco. But what you really learn about people is what they do with that moment, and what he did with that moment was impact people the rest of his life using that platform. And to me, that's the most admirable thing about him.
No question about that. And it was over and over. And again, I'm so glad you mentioned Dana, because obviously our deepest condolences go to her. But she's been by his side every time we turn around. It wasn't just Franco, but Dana's always there.
Yeah, and usually trying to herd him on to the next thing, because Franco, I mean, he was a lot like my dad in that, he had a genuine interest when someone would approach them. He would have a genuine interest, in what their backstory was and where they came from and that kind of thing. He was a very curious person that way. We were on the Happy Valley cruise 2 years ago, and we were sitting. We had just toured Hemingway's house. And we were sitting in Sloppy Joe's, Lydell Mitchell and Franco and I, and someone came over to him, and he was iconic. All these years later, came over and said, "You're Franco Harris?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm a Raiders fan. I hated you all my life, but I can't hate you anymore." And he just rolled with it, and it was it was just a great moment. But then Franco, well, why were you a Raiders fan, and where did you grow up? And just he got all this backstory out of this guy, which was really fascinating. That he took the time to be interested in other people, and that's just he's a selfless guy.
How old were you? 3, 4 when the Immaculate Reception took place, if that. I
was 4, so I don't remember when it happened. I don't have that memory, and I confessed this to Franco many years ago that when I was a kid, I was a Cowboy and Roger Staubach fan. Now he's forgiven me, thankfully. I got absolution, but that was because the Cowboys used to send us free stuff, and no other team did. So if you're 8 years old and you get a Roger Staubach jersey in the mail, who are you rooting for? At 8, you can be bought off easily. Doesn't take much, but as it's come to be, I mean, it's just the admiration for the kind of person he is, and everything you thought, as high a standard as you thought he lived up to, it was even more so.
Yeah, which is absolutely true. Did you ever become a Steelers fan and root for Franco Harris, or did that Cowboy buy-off continue to keep you ingrained?
When the Cowboys fired Tom Landry, I divorced him because I'm loyal. Because what they did to Tom Landry was horrible. Right. And when I got married to a woman from Pittsburgh, I learned I better root for the Steelers, or else it was going to be I was going to spend many Sunday nights on the couch. Yeah.
Well, that means you're smart in that regard. That means you're smart in that. Yeah, no question. Obviously, he was so fond of your dad. When his name came up, what did your dad talk about when it came to him?
He used to talk. When I first went to, I'll take it back even further. When I first went to UVA, I worked for George Welsh, who recruited Franco, and he used to talk about Franco and what a great basketball player he was, and what a great athlete he was. Then Joe would talk about Franco was so smart in terms of understanding not just the front seven of a defense, but where the secondary was, and seeing the whole field, which a lot of running backs don't do. And he said when Franco got in secondary, if he got a step, he knew where it was coming. He knew where pursuit was coming from, and he was going to get in the end zone. He said he just had that sense and those smarts because he understood the game. But Joe talked about that a bunch, and really talked about the kind of person he was off the field as well, which I think spoke volumes, because Joe was not a guy, as you know, Steve, who lavished praise willy-nilly.
Right. Oh, exactly. But, it's interesting because you bring that up about knowing where everybody is. That was the saving grace play for him in the preseason, and this is a story that Jack tells me, Jack Ham. You and I both know Franco's not the greatest practice player on the planet, okay? Yep. Whether it's Penn State or the Steelers. So they're going through training camp. It's like, okay, what is the deal with this guy? Literally. And they're playing, then they play the first preseason game with, I believe it was the Atlanta Falcons. And they give him the ball, and he goes left, and it's all clogged. Boom, circles back, finds the alley, and goes, 70, 75 yards for a touchdown. Chuck Noll looked back at everybody and said, okay, we're okay there. Don't really worry about him in practice anymore.
Exactly. But I mean, he just was one of those guys that, the thing that's amazing about him is how iconic he remained all these years later. Mm-hmm. I mean, the number of times that I was with him in public, I mean, this is a guy at the time hadn't played in the NFL since the 80s, and just you look at it, you would see people walk by in the street and go, that's Franco Harris, and it's just, it's been amazing how the reaction today, just across so many sectors. I mean, he transcended the sport, and he always will.
And what's interesting in transcending the sport, because you and I had you knew him a lot better than I did, but I still knew him, was how humble he was. I mean, he gave people time, He did not run. He had no ego, and that's a part about him I always admired. He gave everybody time because he didn't have any ego. He was not one of those guys when you walked away and went, "I met Franco Harris." You walked away and went, "I met Franco Harris. He is awesome."
Yeah, I mean, just in his patience. I mean, it's just he was patient with everybody, and just really giving. And like I said, it just there's certain people in sports who they know who they are. They don't need the adulation, and they carry themselves with a poise and an air about them that becomes charismatic. Whether it was DiMaggio, I was fortunate to be around DiMaggio with my dad once or twice. Walter Payton, certainly, Franco Harris is in that same group where they didn't need to be adored. They showed up wherever when they showed up, I mean, people recognized them without them having to remind everybody how great they were. And, in an era where people just can't wait to go on social media and brag about everything they do, he's an old school guy that way, and I think that's why he was so beloved, because he did not think he was above anybody, and he just carried himself in a way that represented the Steelers and Penn State and his family in the right way.
I think the two words I think of are poise and grace.
Yep.
I mean, the way he carried, and he ran a few steps at Beaver Stadium, just so everybody knows. Somebody,
I gotta tell you,
who told him to run to the ball?
No question, Joe. I'll tell you, last week we were going to have him on our Nittany Game Week TV show this week, and just by chance last Monday I said, let's get him this week because next week will be really, really busy. And so we interviewed him last week, and he talked about how all those years of Joe yelling, "Go to the ball, Franco! Go to the ball, Franco!" And in that moment, how he had been trained to go to the ball really, really mattered. And then I asked him about a couple of things. One was, a lot of people know with Franco, they played that game, and then it was on the 23rd, so they had Christmas Day off as a team. So he went to the airport after the game to fly home. And, we live in the era where opposing players hug each other and trade jerseys, and everybody's everybody's buddy. And Franco and Dana get to the airport, and there's only like one restaurant open. They walk in, and the entire Raiders team is in there. And they all look and see him come in, and Franco realized pretty quickly that he might want to back away slowly and not startle anybody. So one guy from the team came over and said something to him. The rest of them glared at him, and he said, "I got to get out of here. Let's find something else to eat." I mean, it's just those little things like that are, it's just neat. And I think one of the great things, when I asked him last week, I said, why do you think that play is still so iconic? And he said, people love stories of hope, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, as long as, people always feel as long as there is time left on the clock, there's hope. And this morning when I heard the news, I thought of that, and I said, the clock may have finally run out on him, but what he's done will endure long past that.
No question. And his loyalty over the last few years, when it came to your dad, meant a lot to all of us. So,
yep, no doubt.
Jay, thanks so much on obviously a tough day, but to you and that beautiful family that I think the world of. Merry Christmas.
Thanks. And same to you and, everybody else out there, Merry Christmas. And for Saturday night, let's go Steelers.
There you go. Thanks, Jay. Appreciate you so much.
Take care.